Louisiana seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for the purposes of inquiring to the House Majority Whip the schedule for next week.
Without objection.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I also ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
With that, I'd be happy to yield to my friend from South Carolina, the Majority Whip of the House, Mr. Clyburn.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I appreciate him letting me stand in today for the Majority Leader. Next week, on Tuesday, the House will meet at 12 p.m. for morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business, with votes expected no later than 6:30 p.m. On Wednesday and Thursday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for morning hour debate and 12 p.m. for legislative business. On Friday, the House will meet at 9 a.m. for legislative business, with last votes no later than 3 p.m. We will consider several bills under suspension of the rules. The complete list of suspension bills will be announced by the close of business tomorrow. In addition, we will consider H.R. 2062, the Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act, which will make it easier for those who have suffered age discrimination in the workplace to file a complaint and seek redress. H.R. 1443, LGBTQ Business Equal Credit Enforcement and Investment Act, which would ensure that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau keeps statistics on credit reporting for LGBTQ-owned businesses in the same way as it does for women and minority-owned companies and small businesses. H.R. 239, Equal Access to Contraception for Veterans Act, which will allow women receiving health care services from the VA system to access basic contraceptive care without paying co-pays, similar to coverage provided under the Affordable Care Act. 3 resolutions of disapproval to reverse regulatory actions made under the prior administration, which have all been passed by the Senate. S.J. Res. 13 would reverse the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's rule that have obscured information about the factual and legal basis the Commission used to make determination and discriminatory practices. S.J. Res. 14 would overturn the prior administration's Environmental Protection Agency rule that removed protections from dangerous methane emissions that exacerbate the climate crisis. S.J. Res. 15 would overturn a rule by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and allow states once again to regulate these lenders and protect consumers in order to rein in predatory lenders and rent-a-bank schemes. With that, I yield back.
I'll thank the gentleman from South Carolina for walking through those, and of course would first like to, as we note that the Majority Leader is not here, wish Mr. Hoyer a speedy recovery. I got to speak with him yesterday, and he's doing better, and appreciates the prayers and thoughts from our colleagues, and told him you don't have to rush back. You want to make sure you get better before you come back, and I know from experience, take the time and get better as he is. And then I offered, by the way, use of my physical therapist, and maybe he and I will do some joint physical therapy when he returns. But he was in good spirits and is looking forward to coming back. So I know the gentleman from South Carolina shares that as well. And I told the gentleman from Maryland, I'm sure he's watching right now as he's recovering, but I said, you know, we've been used to sparring and having some fun conversations back and forth through the select subcommittee on the coronavirus, but we also look forward to seeing him back in the middle of this fray soon too. If I may, I did want to ask, there are a couple of bills that deal with the origin of the coronavirus, and I know we've been having those conversations about trying to get a deeper investigation into the origin of the coronavirus. But the Senate had passed over a few weeks ago a bill, S 1867, that came out of the Senate unanimously back in May, which requires the Director of National Intelligence to declassify information that relates to the origin of COVID-19. And I'm not sure if this is a bill that y'all were looking at bringing up, but we wanted to just ask if we could have S 1867 brought to the House floor. It was a bill that passed unanimously out of the Senate, which does indicate that there was strong interest on both sides to get that information declassified so we can get more information about the origin of COVID for all of our members to be able to see, not just those members that have access to that information. And so I'm not sure, again, if the gentleman was looking at that, but if that's something y'all could look at, I think it would be well received by both sides and then would help us quickly get that information available for all to see. And I would yield to the gentleman. If there was
Thank the gentleman for yielding. You and I have been having this discussion for quite a while with our select subcommittee activities. I have not seen the legislation that you make reference to, but I'm sure that the majority leader has. And like you, I'm looking forward to his speedy recovery so he can get back into the spot. I'm a little more familiar with sparring with you in our select subcommittee than on this floor. But having said that, I think you are aware that the Biden administration has already directed the United States intelligence community to examine this issue, calling on the intelligence community to redouble, I'm quoting him now, redouble their efforts to report their findings by August 24th, and to keep Congress fully apprised of their work. We have confidence in their ability to conduct a robust, evidence-based inquiry into the origin of the coronavirus, and will not allow House Republicans to irresponsibly hijack this issue for partisan purposes. We want to see this thing happen. And you and I have had this discussion. And because they've got the August 24th, that's what, 3 months from now or less? I think we'll be in a good place to let the Intelligence Committee do its work. And now you're back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. And I know there's an old adage, why put off tomorrow what you can do today? There is unanimous support for S 1867 to not wait until August. And in fact, it was May when senators, all Republicans and all Democrat senators, recognized that this is something that we should do and we should do now. And this would get more information out to the public as well as to our members. I would also ask if the majority would look at HRES 90, which is a resolution that supports the international investigation into this origin of COVID-19. There are many countries, we've heard a lot of European countries that have expressed interest in having a international commission to look into this. I don't know why the United States would be reluctant to be a part of that investigation. But again, in light of all of the new information that's come out, some emails recently since our committee has met that show more and more that there is a high likelihood that COVID-19 started in the Wuhan lab. Whether it was intentional or not, there is strong evidence pointing to the fact that it likely started there. We have not had a single hearing, not any of the standing committees. And here we have a committee that, by its name, the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus, was established for the purpose of investigating COVID-19, all elements of it, not just what's happening here in America. We just recognized over 600 deaths from COVID-19 on the steps of the Capitol just a few days ago. So clearly it's hit our country hard, but it's hit the whole world hard. Millions of people have died, and now there's real evidence that's come out, including from some of our own scientists here in America, that they may have been aware over a year ago that COVID-19 originated in the lab, as opposed to what the original projections were, that it was a bat-to-human transmission. Now there's a lot of evidence pointing to the opposite of that. And in fact, many of us were calling for that investigation over a year ago, and some were called conspiracy theorists. And yet now the hard scientific data shows that it may have been, in fact, started in that lab. Why are we not having those hearings now in our committee, other committees, again, not months from now, but if China knew of this, there may not be scientists that we can get access to, but we have American scientists who were in communication with those scientists. Whether it's directly or indirectly, may have been taxpayer funds that were involved in that. We should be trying to find that out now. And China may be trying to cover some of that up. The quicker we can get those hearings and those investigations, the more we can find out while it's still possible to find it out. And I think it would help a lot of us to understand what really happened, what went wrong. Because if it was started in that lab, this would be a disaster dramatically greater than Chernobyl in terms of devastation to the world, human life loss. We should all want to be finding out. There were a lot of investigations into Chernobyl. This is dramatically worse than Chernobyl. And if it was self-made, that is something we should be investigating now. I'm not sure why there's a reluctance to do it, but I would ask the gentleman if I could just reiterate. I know we sent a letter, over 200 of our colleagues signed on asking that we investigate it. All the committees of jurisdiction, including ours. And then I would yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to assure you that I am as anxious to know exactly what happened as you are. And the American people want to know exactly what happened. The fact of the matter is, though, we have several committees who are investigated, including the House, I think we call it the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, have indicated that they intend to look into the matter. Now, you know, like you, I'm from the South. You can get too many cooks in the kitchen. And I'm fully aware that to have a plethora of committees stumbling over each other trying to get to the bottom of this will serve no useful purpose. And so I want to see things done here as close to regular order as we possibly can have them done, and to let the committees of jurisdiction conduct their investigation. This administration, working through its intelligence department, doing the investigations, and I'm sure they'll come up with the kind of information that will do us as citizens and as members of this great body justice. With that, I'll yield back.
No, thank the gentleman, and we'll continue to press for that investigation. And you know, I'm from New Orleans. I know what it's like to have cooks in the kitchen, but I also know how important it is to have a lot of eyes looking at the same thing. And the more eyes looking into something where there is mystery, where there is uncertainty, where there is speculation, I think the more people looking at this, the better. And again, our committee is uniquely set up, but there are other committees that are set up to look at different aspects of it. We should all be looking at it, because the more questions we ask, it seems like right now more questions are raised. We need to get answers to those questions, and we get those answers by having that oversight hearing. We don't want some kind of Soviet-style cover-up. We want to be looking at those questions and having people brought in. There are American scientists, some people who work for this United States government, who could help us answer those questions, and they haven't been brought forward. We can compel them to come forward, especially in light of these emails that have come out recently, which show that some of those scientists were aware over a year ago that it may have started in the lab. That was not shared with us in previous hearings. And I think a lot of our members on both sides would like to find that information out as much as we can. And the more we're asking questions, the more I think we will get answers that everybody in our country and around the world wants to know. So we will continue to press for that. I also wanted to ask about the appropriations process. I understand the Appropriations Committee is starting to do some work to start bringing up the bills in committee so that we can hopefully have an appropriations process move forward. We would be strongly encouraging a bipartisan appropriations process, but also an open appropriations process. And so as we look to the floor schedule, we're hearing that maybe in July some of these bills would come to the floor. As the gentleman knows, when we bring appropriations bills to the floor, whether it's a fully open process or even a modified process, you typically have well over 100 amendments that come to the floor on these appropriations bills. Does the gentleman anticipate that we would start around July seeing some of those bills come to the floor, and will we have that ability on the floor to have those kind of amendments brought forward in a process that we've seen in the past. I would yield.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. The Appropriations Committee has announced that it will start its process next week with 4 subcommittee markups. Over the next 2 weeks, and then the week of July 12th, the committee will complete subcommittee and full committee markups on all 12 of the annual appropriations bills. We plan to consider the bills on the floor the final 2 weeks of July, when we are in session. That will be the week of July 19th and July 26th. Now, I suspect that we'll be close to what the gentleman just indicated he would like to see with the schedule. And I'm certain that the Appropriation Committee will do everything it possibly can to keep that schedule so that we will complete all of our work before the August break. Are you back?
Thank the gentleman, and we look forward to that robust process through both committee, but ultimately on the floor. Last point I wanted to ask about deals with infrastructure. We're seeing a lot of different groups, both in the House and Senate, that are working on various infrastructure plans. I know we had members on our side, Ranking Member Graves, and others rolled out a plan recently that covers traditional infrastructure, which would be roads and bridges, even broadband, waterways, paid for along the way, not with tax increases, but with responsible budgeting. I wanted to ask, because we're hearing different reports on what may or may not come to the House floor, budget reconciliation possibly, tax increases unfortunately are still being floated out there, which is different from what we're hearing right now with the bipartisan Senate plan. Can the gentleman shed light on what is anticipated on the floor, whether it would be a budget reconciliation bill in the weeks or months ahead, or maybe a bipartisan plan, which we would surely encourage, and laid out some ideas of infrastructure that would be bipartisan that we would support. And if the gentleman could answer that, I'd be happy to yield.
Thank the gentleman for yielding to me for an answer. I think the gentleman is aware that I am very anxious about doing things in the bipartisan way when that can be achieved. And now the Majority Leader has announced that during the week of June 28th, the House will take up the Invest in America Act, a 5-year surface transportation reauthorization bill that was approved by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee by a bipartisan vote. I think the gentleman is aware of the pretty long session, all-night session, that both parties in that committee undertook, and I think that they have produced a product that will make these key investments in smart, safe, sustainable, and resilient transportation infrastructure that is needed by the American people to move goods and services throughout our country efficiently, effective, and equitably. I could not go through this colloquy with the gentleman and not invoke those 3 words that he is so familiar with. Now, at the same time, we must remember that our nation's infrastructure is comprised of far more than roads and bridges. I often talk about the advent of the internet. I can remember when it first came on the scene, everybody referred to the internet as the information superhighway. And I've always advocated that it's time for us to start treating the information highway the same way we treat the interstate highways. And so I agree with the gentleman that we should move with an infrastructure bill, but I want him to know that I think it's important that the Accessible, Affordable Internet for All Act is a part of that. And I know there's a debate that's been going on as to whether or not we ought to move on a bipartisan bill that focuses on traditional infrastructure. Now, for anything to be traditional, it's got to be in our past. But I think that it's time for us to be looking to the future when we talk about infrastructure. And to have an infrastructure bill come through this body that focuses on the future of health care, which cannot be efficient, effective, or equitable without broadband. Online learning is a must for our children. We know COVID-19, according to all the experts, may not be the last time that we are faced with such a pandemic. There are some predicting that there could come another one, maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe in yours. And we must be prepared. So I'm hopeful this infrastructure bill that we move through this body will not just be traditional, but will be looking to the future so we can have the kind of legislation that will prepare our children and grandchildren for a world that we hope they will be competitive in. Now you're back.
Thank the gentleman, and hopefully we can have that debate and work together to achieve that vision for the future as we're dealing with the problems of today and our infrastructure needs of today, but also do it in a fiscally responsible way. And I think that's what the two sides, especially in the Senate, are looking at. Still haven't gotten an indication specifically as it deals with some kind of reconciliation bill that may or may not come to the floor. Hopefully it's not some attempt to raise taxes and do things that would undermine our economy and our competitiveness and our ability to create more opportunities for people to achieve the American dream by entering into the workforce and ultimately moving their way up and having their own opportunities as well. That would be undermined with higher taxes. But if that part of the equation gets brought in, clearly that changes the dynamic. But hopefully we stick to the traditional infrastructure needs that you and I would both agree need to be met. Hopefully we can find a path to get there together, and that's what we will be working towards in the week ahead. And with that, if the gentleman had anything else, I know I'm prepared to yield back.
I don't have anything else. I'd like to thank the gentleman for allowing me to stand in here today, and I say to him that I would hope that as we go forward with this discussion, we will look at it, this whole issue, as the title of the bill indicates: invest in America. And when we make investments, financial investments, the money may leave our coffers, but it comes back sometimes tenfold. So it's a big difference in raising taxes and making investments. And with that, I yield back.
Well, hopefully we can keep that difference in mind. And I appreciate the gentleman filling in, and we'll see the gentleman from Maryland back soon enough, and maybe even moving a little faster than before. I'm not going to challenge him to a race because he would defeat me in that. With that, thank my friend from South Carolina and yield back the balance of my time.